Hey everyone, my name is Jack. Welcome back to the channel. I cover a variety of topics as they relate to real estate, investing, the markets, and pretty much everything as it has to do with personal finance. So if you like that sort of content, be sure to have a look around the channel. And if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe. But today I want to talk about the eviction moratorium that Donald Trump just passed using the CDC as the mechanism for passing this order. That's right. Apparently we're supposed to believe that the Center for Disease Control is able to control evictions. So that is where we're at in 2020. I actually want to go through the details of this order with you, so I'm going to head over to my computer right now and we can actually take a look at the text of this order and what it's saying and what it's purporting to do. Because if it stands, this is a pretty far-reaching order that's coming right out of the executive. It's not going through Congress or anything like that. This is a broad bill that is going to have broader economic implications as well, and definitely big political ramifications, I would think. Hey everyone, welcome to my computer. So this is the CDC's order. Yes, the Centers for Disease Control is deciding to issue this eviction ban. So you can see right here, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, is acting to temporarily halt residential evictions to prevent the further spread of the pandemic. Oh, that's clever. So apparently evictions are a public health crisis, but only now are they a public health crisis, enough to justify banning evictions across the board. And this is through the executive, the CDC, through the Department of Health and Human Services. They are doing it through the executive, through the president, not through Congress. And they are saying that because this is enough of a health issue, apparently evictions are, only now is it appropriate to ban evictions. See, if my only real big problem here is with that reasoning is if it's a public health crisis now, why wasn't it before? I mean, of course there's a risk to a person's health if they go homeless or they're kicked out onto the street truly and there's nowhere else for them to go. So why is it being used as pretext now? And really, I think it's about buying votes, essentially, as I'll get to after I jump back onto the camera and out of this computer here. But you can see this order is effective through December 31st, 2020, starting today, September 4th. So this is a pretty substantial, long ban on evictions. And this is already keeping in mind that there are eviction moratoriums across the country, and this is kind of extending a lot of those. It actually says it down here. Let me get to that point. Yep, here it is. Under this order, a landlord or owner of residential property or other person with a legal right to pursue eviction or possessory action shall not evict any covered person, which is anyone who made less than about $100,000. So anyone who is eligible for a stimulus check is the criteria that they're using. So anyone under that cannot be evicted in any jurisdiction to which this order applies, which is every single state, except and all territories minus Samoa, because there have been no cases there. So this order does not apply to any state, local, territorial, tribal area with a moratorium or residential eviction that provides the same or greater level of public health protection than the requirements listed in this order. I love how they're spinning eviction moratoriums into public health protection when they're really primarily, at least my understanding has always been, they're economic protections for tenants. Now they're spinning it into this public health argument, which seems like a complete overreach by this department and the executive in general. Real estate law is a state law issue, but now all of a sudden we're saying that the president, through his executive branch and through something like the CDC, can just issue blanket bans because it's a vague public health crisis. That seems very dangerous just from a legal precedent perspective. If we're saying this is okay, then how much further can the executive go with controlling everyday life of people and their property? And it just seems like I love the slippery slope argument because it seems pretty convincing when you see it in this context. This is a huge move by the president and his office. And just to reiterate who is actually covered under this, a covered person means any tenant or resident of a residential property who provides to their landlord, the owner of the property, or any other person with a legal right to actually evict them. So I guess that could potentially include a lender with a holdover tenant, that the individual has to use their best efforts to obtain all government assistance for rent or housing. So basically they have to apply for rental assistance in some way. They can't earn more than $100,000 for year 2020, or no more than $198,000 if you're filing jointly. And you have to be unable to pay it due to substantial loss of household income or loss of hours, or basically just you have tough financial experiences, which come up from time to time, especially in recessions. The individual is using their best efforts to make timely or partial payments, so I guess you can't stiff them technically, but I mean, how are they going to prove that? And then eviction would likely render the individual homeless. Oh, well, of course it would. It's eviction. That's typically the first step, sadly, that's what happens in an eviction. A landlord wants their property back, so they kick someone out. It's not a happy thing for any side. It's especially brutal for the poor, so I guess this is what this bill is really trying to do. But if they're really trying to aim it towards poor people with no means, they could have done that. But instead, it's the super broad, basically applying to almost everyone, not just those making a small amount of money or whatever. This is a huge vote-buying act, essentially. Whether you agree with this policy itself or not is beside the point. Yes, this is a very controversial issue. We have a lot of people who are hurting right now across the country. That is not debatable. There are tons of people in a terrible situation. Is this the best way to solve it? I don't think so personally, but maybe you do. I'm really more worried about how this is being carried out. This isn't Congress. This isn't like a state passing this through its Congress or even through its governor. This is the President of the United States deciding what every single state can do when it comes to evictions, which is a huge part of state law everywhere. So it just seems like a huge overreach in my eyes, just in understanding how our federal system works, that this is a massive step in the direction of having a massive executive branch. We already have a super powerful president. If this is allowed, which I don't think it would be in the long term, but in the short term, there's not much you could do here since the courts are pretty backed up. I'll talk about that in a second, but this is a big deal. So really, I don't think there's another way to put this other than that it's really just trying to buy votes. President's trying to take advantage of a very dormant Congress right now that has big goals but isn't really doing anything other than posturing, whereas Donald Trump is using that as an opportunity to show how much he cares for the people, and look at all this big action he's taking, unlike Congress, which is very gridlocked and doesn't do anything except for a bill every once in a while, usually throwing helicopter money every few months just to throw the people a bone. And of course, all of this is with money that the government doesn't have, which I've certainly talked about on this channel before, but nothing that the Fed wouldn't just print into existence. It all comes back to this central issue around the pandemic, which is who is going to shoulder the cost. The government recognizes that no one's really at fault for this pandemic, but they're trying to pay for it and keep everything afloat as though nothing actually happened by throwing tons of bailouts and loans and new stimulus programs, all these unemployment boosts, and all these different programs to try and pretend like we don't have other economic issues to worry about. And this isn't to say that there isn't going to be a very large eviction issue in the very near future. The problem is all this order is doing is kicking the can down the road, just like so many of these other policies. They're not addressing any core issue, and all they're doing is delaying the inevitable. Now, whether you believe property should be a right and that landlords should have the right to evict people, that's totally beside the point. The point is, the law says they do have that right. They have a right to life, liberty, and property, just as you and I have, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense that the executive can just come in and say, yeah, who cares? We'll just do this order through the CDC to tell everyone that they can't evict anyone, and they put their stamp on it, and that's it. That's your due process, apparently. I'm sure this will go to court, but the problem is the courts are so overbooked right now, I highly doubt this will actually get fast-tracked anywhere where it needs to go, to where it can actually be finished before the end of the year, or certainly before the election. So we'll probably not have an actual judicial outcome as to the constitutionality of this order before it's actually done. Not to say that landlords or whoever wouldn't be compensated for their losses if there are any, but it's just going to be a whole mess of a process, and we're probably not going to get an answer until it's really just too late. So I think we're going to have to live with the fact that apparently evictions across the country are pretty much not going to be happening. Because our system is so reliant on real estate debt, I really hope that renters and landlords alike continue paying their bills as they can, even though landlords really don't have much recourse against tenants, since pretty much anyone could just say, well, I've been affected by the pandemic. I don't know who hasn't been affected by the pandemic in some way, especially economically. So unless you're a high earner, if you're a tenant, I mean, you really have a lot of leverage here, since the landlord has no recourse against you if you just stop paying rent. I'm not suggesting that you stop paying rent, because that'll certainly affect your credit in some way. But really all this is going to do is it's going to make the eventual eviction flood much bigger, because you're just going to have a bigger and bigger backlog of people who would otherwise have been evicted. It's just going to cause a total mess. And then you're probably going to have more policies to try and kick this can out as far as it possibly can go, even if that comes back down to helicopter money and just giving everyone a rent check, some universal rent income or something like that. I don't know. The government does a lot of crazy things right now when it comes to new revolutionary policies, most of them revolving around money printing. Not really sure what this is going to do for the housing market. It's probably going to be a huge mess when this whole thing unwinds, since all we're doing is delaying the inevitable. I don't know how many times I have to say that. This isn't really doing anything real. It's just delaying what's going to happen in greater and greater numbers because we keep shutting the door on what really needs to happen at this point. Though eventually, I guess we'll have the situation where you can't be evicted and the government will pay landlords to prevent evictions, and you'll just get this fake system of printed money paying landlords as the currency becomes worthless, and then no one gets evicted, and then the whole system just falls apart. I really don't want that to happen, but it seems like we're just inching closer and closer every week as we pass more and more of these new policies. If you disagree with me, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to get your stance on it. Of course, I'm not the all-knowing person on this issue. I'm just giving my hot take on it. If you have a different opinion, I'd love to see it in the comments below, and I'd like to have a civil discourse about it. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. If you like this video, please like it since it helps the channel out a lot. If you like more of these sort of policy-focused videos, definitely let me know in the comments below, and definitely give this video a like so I know to make more of them. You might like the California wealth tax video I did just a couple weeks ago. I'll definitely leave that in the end screen if you want to check that out. But otherwise, yet another reminder to check out my new book, The One Property Retirement, about a simple strategy for building your retirement nest egg using real estate. So definitely check that out in the description below, and leave a review on Amazon if you end up buying and reading the book. I would be very appreciative. But until next time, take care.